Good evening. Welcome to what I think is the 14th segment in our Bob and Elizabeth Dole series on leadership. Some of you I recognize from prior events, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a level set of what we're doing. As you remember, the vice presidential candidate to Ross Perot started out by saying, who am I and why am I here, which is not a great way to introduce yourself to the country. But in this series, what we are trying to do is call on national leaders from government and academia and the arts and business to try to help us understand what are the characteristics and the circumstances that enable some people to lead in challenging environments. I think the question of what enables some to unite diverse views is a question that is obviously very much on the minds of people in Washington. And we came to believe that while we focus a great deal on the Congress and the administration, that there just might be some ideas from outside DC that would be relevant to this discussion. And so to help us reflect on that today, joined by Barbara Humpton, who last year was named the CEO of Siemens USA. Siemens has about 50,000 employees, about $23 billion in revenue. They happen to be the hometown largest company here in Washington, D.C., which I don't think many people are aware of. And before taking over the helm at Siemens, Barbara worked as the CEO of Siemens Government Technologies, was vice president of Booz Allen Hamilton, Lockheed Martin, and actually began her career at IBM. So a couple of reasonably interesting roles in the changing technology culture that I'm eager to talk about. Before diving in, just want to acknowledge, as always, that we're really proud to have named this series in honor of Bob and Elizabeth Dole. I think those of you who know them know that they are both proud partisans and people who have used humor and empathy and their commitment to the country to actually bring people together and actually get things done. And so it is in that spirit that I would like to start off by saying, so what does Siemens do?
Well, first, I do want to join you in saying that it is an honor to be a speaker in the Bob and Elizabeth Dole Leadership Series. Truly, what models of leadership? And you think about the eras through which they have led us, and they've been quite a team as well as individual leaders. Here we are at a time where I think we do need this kind of leadership, and in every one of our generations, of course, it's been essential, but maybe now more than ever. What does Siemens do?
I should say, as a focus group, because we're a scientific and evidence-based organization, I asked 2 Uber drivers and 1 cab driver.
Yes.
And the Uber driver who was from Africa said, oh, that's a big energy company.
Okay.
From Africa.
Yes.
The cab driver didn't know, and I said, they build big things, what do you think? And he said, submarines. So I think it might have just been the sea. I'm not sure what that. And then technology was what the third person said.
Okay, so they're all right, right? This is people around the elephant. What do you see? Siemens, sometimes we say the biggest, oldest company in the world. Some are bigger, some are older. No one is bigger and older than Siemens. But size and age really aren't the differentiator, aren't the discriminator now. It's what we're about. So Siemens is a business to society company. I mean, think about it. There are a lot of companies today who are B2C, business to consumer, a lot that are B2B, serving other businesses. We do work with consumers, we do work with businesses. But what we're doing is bringing value to society. Think about the needs of energy in a transforming energy ecosystem around the world. Think about the requirements for healthcare, or what's happening now in manufacturing in the 4th Industrial Revolution. What you'll find is that Siemens is using our skills in electrification, automation, and digitalization to really advance all of those areas. Now, when you talk to folks around Siemens, what you'll discover is that no matter what area we're in, we're focused on these global megatrends. The Siemens business strategy was built around these megatrends like climate change, like urbanization. And it's that commitment to solve those big, hard problems that unites us. And so each of us are bringing our own know-how to work each day to tackle those.
So you were personally acknowledged as a leader who was blazing a path in uncertain times. which is a compliment and potentially a curse. Someone told me recently that the world is moving faster today than ever before, and it will never move as slowly as it's moving right now.
That's right.
And so you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution, but so unpack that a little more. What does that mean to you, not just in terms of technology, but also want to talk a little bit about workforce and the dignity of work, and how do you think about that megatrend?
Yeah, this is critical. This is critical to our success as a nation, and this is something that's going on globally today. We're living at the beginning of an age when our whole physical world is getting connected. Think about the Internet of Things. Now think about the Internet of really big things. The same technologies that have connected us in communication and in entertainment, the devices around our home, we're now finding that we can use that same technology to make our transportation systems more effective. We're finding that if we use that technology in our healthcare systems, we can actually improve therapies, diagnosis, et cetera. So the fourth industrial revolution is allowing us to use data to find new products, new services, new business models to accomplish things that have never been done before. And we have a lot of people who are afraid of this. And if you look back through history, you'll see that each industrial revolution brought the same kind of reaction, right? The machines are going to take over our jobs. So when steam was first used to replace sheer muscle power, when electricity was introduced, when automation was introduced, at each stage people said, whoa, this is getting scary. And here we are at a time when we're beginning to ingest data and using machine learning and artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, to help us do things differently. Well, our perspective at Siemens is really simple on all of this. What we say is, these are tools in the hands of humans. Mm-hmm. And from the first time a human picked up a rock and used it as a tool, tools have been elevating the role of the human, right? We do more, we do it more effectively because of the tools we have within our reach. It's not anything to be afraid of, but this pace of change is accelerating. So what do we have to do in order to embrace this and actually be effective in these changing times? Well, we're advocates of really looking at how we ourselves prepare and interact then with the built world and with this more automated and more data-driven society that we're creating. We're believers in lifelong learning. The idea now that because of the healthcare we've been providing, because of the standards of living that have been rising all around the world, actually careers are going to last far longer, decades longer than they used to. If we used to think, hey, we'll go to college, we'll learn everything we need to know for a 30-year career, we'll get a gold watch, we'll retire, play golf, fish, and really that's not going to be the model. I mean, I have 30 years in the rearview mirror by a long shot, and I'm not having anything.
You're not wrapping it up anytime soon?
Not that I'm intending. We can talk to my management. But my intent is that I and the others with whom I'm dealing will see the challenges ahead and will say, I want to make the investment in learning about the next thing, finding out what's out there, understanding how I can take the depth of my expertise from certain areas and now wrap in these new tools. At Siemens, one of the things we've been focused on is building multi-generational teams for just this reason. Turns out if you work in energy infrastructure, frankly, that infrastructure has been there for decades, and when we install things today, it'll be there for decades to come. Staying power matters. And yet, we also need to be able to introduce those tools that digital natives use so easily. And what we found is that if we can just create teams where we've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, they actually are very synergistic. People feed off of each other's knowledge, and we find some of our multi-decade tenured employees getting excited about the new tools they can bring to the table. And likewise, we find the digital natives who may have thought they knew everything, discovering that they don't yet. It's nice.
Generational collaboration is something I'm a fan of, as my children teach me things every day. So one of the key questions around the robots taking over is that right now our economy is pretty zip code sorted, and there are parts of the country that are doing well and are probably going to figure out how to pick up those rocks and do great things with them. And the assumption is they're a part of the country that's just going to be left farther behind, that are not going to hook on to that new opportunity. I'm sure you see this globally, but how do you think about the kind of dispersion of that opportunity?
This is one of the biggest issues, and I actually think we can help a lot here. The urban-rural divide, I mean, we talk about this as almost as a given. Cities. In cities, you get access to jobs. You've got access to the communication bandwidth you need, the power you need. Cities, it's true, the world is becoming more urbanized. We believe that by 2050, 70% of all people will live in cities. So what does that do to rural areas? Well, there's a counter theme here and a thread that I think we can tap into. And really, if you have power and if you can get communications, then in this new world of digital technology, anyone can have access. I had the chance to visit a community outside of Denver, Colorado, Sterling Ranch. Siemens is a technology partner for the developers who had this vision. They said, if we can bring in enough bandwidth for our residents, then they're going to be using the technologies of tomorrow. We're going to be a very sustainable, eco-friendly, and connected community. Turns out they have a resident who does maintenance on MRIs in India from his basement in Sterling Ranch. It's that kind of capability that's very real. So I've been talking to a lot of educational institutions about the idea of creating ecosystems in more rural areas where we could find the ability to have a learning community. Bring in the technologies that we know, especially right now where we need more talent to support all the jobs that we have. If we can create an ecosystem of the learning institutions, if we can work with local governments to get the bandwidth that's needed so that people can be connected effectively, then we can bring folks online and create real opportunity. And let me give you an example of this. Think about the manufacturing regions of the country. We've had people who are fantastic at making things, true makers. It's part of their lifeblood. And we've seen how manufacturing has evolved and migrated over time. Well, the next phase of manufacturing makes use of digital tools. We can create digital twins of products that we're going to build. We can create digital twins of production facilities where they'll actually be made, et cetera. You don't necessarily have to be on premises to be an expert in what the next, scooter is going to look like. And by the way, what about the interfaces to those engineering tools? A lot of those interfaces are becoming more user-friendly, and engineering tomorrow could feel more like playing a video game. So I'm a big believer that what we can do is democratize our access to engineering tools, to the technologies that are essential to the world we're creating, and draw more people into the game.
So you talked about a kind of a business to society orientation, and I want to ask you a little bit about the kind of Vision 2020. But the larger question is the role of corporate leaders in society. I think we've talked to a number of CEOs, all who one way or another say, wow, things are different than they were 10 years ago. Not just in terms of my kind of stakeholder engagement, but the expectation that I'm going to have a view on climate change, on guns, on bathrooms, on the issues of the moment, right? That some ways the federal government is kind of leaving some of that field, and there's a lot of expectation that you're going to fill it.
As we should.
So how's that going? Where have there been opportunities that you've really embraced? Where have there been things that have really kind of caught you by surprise?
Yeah. No, this is key. So actually, Siemens signed on to the Business Roundtable updated purpose statement. And the reason is because we recognize it as right. Most of the companies who signed on have already embraced these principles, that there are more stakeholders in the business realm than just the shareholders. And so the idea that the work we do is a vital part of society. Yes, governments are an important societal institution, so are philanthropic organizations, right? The nonprofits who are driving action. But the for-profit businesses play a vital role in society. We are institutions that need to be responsible for our share of the task. And so what we're seeing, actually, I'll share with you that as Siemens, I think sometimes we have to deal with some of the toughest issues. We signed on as one of the first companies to make a commitment to be carbon neutral. In 2015, we made the commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. We said we would be halfway there by 2020. In the US, we have the largest footprint in the company. Here in the US, we're about 25% of Siemens' presence globally. And we've got, obviously, a tremendous challenge to hit that carbon neutral goal. But we're going to hit this 50% mark, and we've got plans in place to go further. The work we do has an environmental portfolio to it. In many cases, we're actually helping our customers achieve their carbon neutral goals. We're one of those companies who's essential for sustainability, and yet we're also part of what I'll call the evolution. There's a spectrum of activities. As we make these transformations as a broader society, our capability in electrification, automation, and digitalization is going to be used by some people who aren't yet very far along on that path. What does that say about us? Right? So it's my belief that Siemens is going to have a very sensitive moral compass as we go. We have to stay calibrated with society and understand what society is asking for the future, where we are now, and whether we're taking the right steps to get there. And it's changing as we move because the world's understanding of what needs to be done is morphing as we go.
So one thing that we're grappling with in the energy climate debate in the kind of political context is embracing the urgency, but then realizing there's got to be kind of a pragmatism to that transition. Right? There's a certain desire to have 100% renewable energy by 2014 that we as an organization are grappling with. And I just want to ask you to think about that transition a little bit in the context of BRT, because there's a lot of support and a lot of impatience. I mean, just to give you a long intro to the question, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon obviously really drove that process a lot, and that same week managed to essentially land the Saudi Aramco IPO. Mm-hmm. And people said, wait a minute, how can you do both these things? Mm-hmm. You are one of the leading companies. You've been there from the very beginning. You're getting pressure right now about a rail linkage to a coal mine in Australia. Mm-hmm. So how do you embrace that purpose, but at the same time feel like you can express your commitments and needs as a corporation with actually, you have shareholders too. How do you work through those tensions in terms of people's expectations to achieve those goals?
Well, first of all, can I just say this is a beautiful and a powerful thing that's going on right now, right? What we're finding is people are raising their voices, they're using their power as individuals, they're expressing themselves, and they're moving things that haven't moved in a long, long time. So I welcome this. I think this is an important time for all of us to understand the urgency of addressing the issues we're facing as a planet. And by the way, I'll tell you this. We use the phrase business to society. We don't use the phrase business to nation, right? No business to country or business to region. Society. What is society? And when you think about the way that decisions in societies have been driven historically, people raising their voices has been a really valuable part of that. We as a business look to governments often as our guidance to say, are we doing what's consistent with this society, what this society wants? And I know that because things are changing so rapidly, we're going to hit moments where the government says one thing and the people rise up and say another. And we're seeing this, right, all over the world. I think businesses are absolutely grappling with that, but it's the right thing for us to be grappling with. So, I mean, if I could ask for a little forbearance from society as we go, we're not going to get everything right. But we're working hard to understand what is the society telling us, and therefore how does that need to inform our decisions.
So you just mentioned the value and challenge of how you kind of align with not just the U.S. government, but how many countries are you active in?
I hear 190.
Yeah,
I once said 210, and somebody said there aren't 210 countries. So
something that we've talked a little bit about, I know you've written a little bit about, is just the imperative for better, more strategic interaction between corporations and governments.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you would just reflect from a kind of a global perspective, where is that working well? How do you think that's working in the U.S.? What would enable a corporate leader to be a societal leader more effectively?
Well, okay, first of all, a comment on the U.S. Can you imagine a better place in the world to do business? Right, we've got all of these fabulous natural resources. We've got talent, basically educational systems that are beyond compare. We've got customers who have financial means. Everyone wants to come to the U.S. and do business. And as I say, with 25% of Siemens business globally, it's obvious this is the right market for us to be performing in. And I like to share with people that it's not simply that we've got a couple of strong Siemens entities here. No, just about every business in Siemens has a presence here in the United States, and it's for all those reasons that we've talked about. Fundamental to all of this is the rule of law, right? Our system is strong, and we as businesses rely on that. So it's interesting, up until now, up until taking this particular job, I had not been, as a leader, personally actively engaged in the broad issues between government and business. These last 2 years, I've had the privilege of getting involved in this dialogue, and it is powerful. The idea that government leaders need to understand the perspective of business leaders, that's, right, let's take that as a given. Most business leaders have a rather poor understanding of how the inner workings of government actually make all of this environment possible, right? So, without going too far into the things that this audience already knows, what I would just say is that I believe we're at a time, technology-wise, where technology is changing so rapidly. I would love to be able to work within lightweight regulatory frameworks, have a collaborative relationship with government, so that responsible businesses can take a leadership role in working within market segments and industries, establishing standards that are responsible for our future and sustainable for our future, and not playing a game of cat and mouse regarding regulation and being told what to do.
So the climate debate, something that you have already spoken a lot about, is going to require massive industrial transition exceptionally quickly. Can the United States of America still build big things?
Oh, yeah.
What do you
Can
got?
we build big things? All right. So what do you have in mind as big things?
Nuclear power plants,
that's a
massive
tough one.
deployed, battery storage, facilities that can sequester carbon. I mean, if you think about the solutions to climate change are going to require some combination of massive renewables and battery storage,
Yeah.
some kind of new nuclear, some kind of coal capture, hydrogen. But like massive trillions of dollars are going to have to be invested, and I watch us struggle dramatically with pipeline by pipeline. It doesn't feel to me like we are in a groove for a massive industrial transition.
I actually, you guys know this, there are so many tentacles tied up in this question of can we do big things, and it depends almost on the topic. I'm seeing our government affairs team here, and as we've worked hard
Coaching to say yes, we can.
on things like on setting the right environment for infrastructure regeneration, for energy transformation. What I'm going to share with you is, yes, we can do this. And point number one is, I happen to be, what would you call it, a viral optimist. I hope it's viral. I'm an optimist who believes that probably the most important part of leadership is helping people envision a positive outcome that we can achieve together. We've seen some great examples of tremendous big projects and large transformations that are going on even as we speak. And sometimes it happens in the most surprising ways. So NASA has decided to go largely commercial, right? It started with a very heavily contracted world in which JPL, right, carried out so many of the plans, had the full responsibility for something as important as the Mars rover. Can you land a rover on Mars? Turns out Siemens had a role in that as the software provider of the digital tools that help JPL design and simulate, practice over and over again, and then successfily land that rover.
It was so cute, too, which was...
It's adorable. And, oh, by the way, fun story. The little wheels that go around, have you seen the wheels? They have like big holes in them. Have you heard the story?
No.
Originally, JPL said, we want this to actually have JPL NASA, and roll around on Mars' surface and, leave our name everywhere. And the answer was, no, you can't do that. So what did the engineers do? They put JPL in Morse code on the tires. Is that brilliant? No, so can we do big things? As a society, we absolutely can. And one of the things I'm excited about is the idea that if we are successful in getting local regions empowered to make the decisions that are right for them, either for their energy future, for their transportation infrastructure, I truly believe that if we can empower that kind of regional decision making more effectively, then we're going to find regions taking a lot of this into their own hands, raising the funds they need, finding the talent that they need, and getting on with it.
So one more question around the kind of this deployment question and maybe the role of government. I mean, the challenge is that the first and second and third of anything is a really high risk proposition.
Yeah.
And we've watched a lot of shareholders suffer against some of those expectations. The government has tried with, Future Gen and Clinch River. I mean, neither the private sector or the public sector has a great track record of not only building those things, but then having the guts to build the second and the third. Do you see an opportunity for a different kind of public-private partnership, or any idea, like how could one bring that risk down such that the private sector and the local and regional will actually be able to take on those challenges?
This is, and again, this is one of those things that we need the Bipartisan Policy Center to help work on, simply because the fear when we talk about some of these large items is that we're creating winners and losers. Mm-hmm. But in fact, when we can structure projects where there's an obvious way to monetize the project so that a private industry could get involved and have a hope of someday recouping their investments, that can be a great thing. But there's another kind of partnership that we've talked about that I think is really powerful, and I'm hoping we'll see more of it, and that's actually on the very front end, right? The government investment in research and development is incredibly powerful. And so we've been huge advocates for partnerships between industry and government at those very early stage ideas, with the idea that ultimately we can spin things out into commercial practice.
So fair warning, I have one or two more questions, and then I'm just going to open it up and see if we have a little broader conversation.
I can just tell by looking at this audience that this is going to be fun.
Very shy. This is kind of a specific issue, but I'm really interested in it, is the issue around apprenticeships. When people talk about the workforce of tomorrow and the fact that a 4-year degree, which is taking most people 6 years these days to get, is maybe not always the right way. The apprenticeship idea, which I know has really been kind of architected in Germany, is something that I think Siemens has thought a bunch about. I mean, are you using that model? Do you think that there's real potential there at a broad scale?
I do, and I've had the privilege to serve on the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board with Ivanka and Secretary Ross, working with other business leaders, education leaders, labor, et cetera. And what's been clear is that a 4-year degree is not, everyone gets this. This is not the only path to the American dream. In fact, for a lot of people, it's just the wrong answer. An investment in 4 years and time away from really doing something more constructive it can be detrimental. And don't even get me started on the debt that people rack up in the process. So obviously, the German system actually works differently. And in a nutshell, I would share with you that in the German system, there's strong alignment at the national level. What are the standards for certain roles to be played, certain jobs to be done? And then education saying, okay, how will we educate people in order to prepare them to meet these standards? And then businesses saying, yes, we will employ people who bear these standards. And you see this incredible power of apprenticeship. And at Siemens, we've had an apprenticeship academy, an institute for well over 100 years, still operational. And we welcome visitors all the time. And it's a really powerful thing when you see what we all know. The best way to learn is to do. And apprentices are given the opportunity to learn, be hands-on, and learn new skills in a safe environment where they're working side by side or alongside long tenured professionals. They're getting feedback on their work, and they're being given coaching on how to improve it. They're getting enough of the academic engagement as well as the hands-on. That's powerful. Now, how do you do that in the US? And what I say to our director over there is, all right, we've got to implement this in the US with an American accent. And what we're finding all across the country is that Siemens organizations love bringing in people who are relatively inexperienced, helping them maybe in a community college arena get specific skills that they need, building a program that builds experience over time. Now, we do have registered apprenticeships, and we worked with the Department of Labor. We developed a playbook that others can pick up and use. You can find it online. We've had apprentices in 9 states. The formal apprenticeship program, incredibly powerful, but it hasn't been used universally for all of our jobs. What I am encouraging our business leaders to do, though, is to think about other ways you can get the spirit of apprenticeship in the work and academic balance as people are moving their way through their careers. And can I say, it's not just about that kind of experience for kids coming out of school. We've had folks at mid-career apply to be in apprenticeship programs. So think about these long careers where people can choose to make a left, make a right, go a different path, and lifelong, basically academic plus hands-on experience, I think is going to be a critical part of that.
So my last question,
yes, sir.
When we were anticipating this, my talented team used the Google, and one of the things they showed me was something that you had written about an experience on a jury. And we take the idea of trust and collaboration and democracy very seriously, and I was really delighted by the piece, and I just wanted to ask you to talk about it a little bit.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to share this because this is, I think, one of the most moving experiences I've had as an American citizen. Last summer, I was actually selected for jury duty for the very first time. I mean, I think a lot of us have had the experience of reporting for jury duty and answering the judge's questions and finding that, oh, maybe the defense attorney really doesn't want us on the jury and being excused.
I get kicked out immediately. As soon as I walk in the door, pretty much, they voir dire me right out there.
So I went to the courthouse that morning, Monday morning, I went to the courthouse with just a small satchel of, crossword puzzles to do while I was going to be waiting. And in fact, I found myself by lunchtime seated in the jury box, and a criminal trial had begun. For 3 days, both the prosecution and the defense deliberated before us. We, the members of the jury, were not, of course, allowed to discuss the facts of the trial, but we got to know each other a little bit as we went to lunch, et cetera. At the end of day 3, the case was delivered to us. And as we departed from the courtroom, jurors turned to each other and said, this is going to be easy. This is so obvious. We got into the jury room. 6 of us said absolutely guilty, and another 6 said absolutely not guilty. The first assignment was to select a foreman. And just that alone, right, is tough. And at the end of the discussion, I agreed to serve as foreman because we were to that point where we were going to draw straws. And I thought, that's a recipe for disaster. So I spoke up and took the responsibility. At the end of the first day of deliberations, I wrote an impassioned note to the judge. Judge, we have been deliberating now, and it is almost certain that we will not come to consensus on any of the 7 charges you have sent to us. And the judge said, thank you very much, jury. You're excused for the weekend. Come back Monday. and continue with your deliberations. I panicked. I mean, right, we're trying to run a business here, and my colleagues were also panicking. And except some of them. Some of them were kind of like, this is okay. We can go for days before we declare the hung jury. And I was like, no. So what we discovered is that what we really needed to do was go through each count, make sure we each understood, shared an understanding of what the count was about. And then we built, I mean, this is like consultant style, right? Built big pages where we had guilty and not guilty. And then as we went through evidence, people moved their opinions one way or another. And if somebody was sort of left as the last, we had real discussions about the reasonable doubt or the strong feeling. And I'm proud to say that on 5 of 7 counts, we came to consensus. And so I wrote my second note to the judge. Judge, we have actually come to a verdict on 5 of the counts. He brought us into the courtroom. We read our verdict, and he dismissed us on the other 2. It was the most powerful experience of democracy that I've had. The idea that we as citizens can engage in civil discourse, that we can overcome doubts and come to reasonable understanding. And in this case, as it turned out, if you've ever had a courtroom experience, you know they can never show you everything. So all of those folks who thought, I'm worried if this person is not guilty and I'm sending an innocent person to prison, I will not forgive myself. Happily, the attorneys came in at the end and shared with us the additional evidence they had not been able to present in court. There was no doubt at all by the time we left the courtroom that we had made the right decisions. So,
love that story.
this is democracy in action. This is how we need to be acting as civil society. And I'm trying to bring that spirit of collaboration in decision making to the hard things that we have to do in our business.
Have you talked to Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer about that? They might find your trial experiences.
If you'd like to line up a little meeting, I'd be happy to attend.
So we got a few more minutes. Anybody want to pose a question? We have fleet-footed mic runners. Kelly, you want to come to the middle of the room here? And just let us again know who you are. And
Hi, I'm Bob Hershey. I'm a consultant for this time of bringing things into a digital world. What is being done to hold meetings online and get people to put up their money online and get the facts out and get an economic consensus.
Now, I'll tell you, for my little part, what's going on in Siemens, we have totally embraced this digital world. And challenge number 1 is don't travel. Don't travel. If we're doing mundane business, let's get together online. And it's amazing how good we've gotten at it. The most powerful is when we can actually be video to video and we can see one another. You know, it keeps us from, you know, watching Real Housewives in the background, right?
Yeah.
But even when we're just voice to voice, I'm finding that that's incredibly powerful. So there are some days when I'm working with people on every continent as we progress in our business here in the United States. Quite powerful. Thank you.
Come on back, Elliot. I think this side of the room's got the mojo at the moment.
Hi, Elliot Roseman with the United States Energy Association. We've met before.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
And you too.
If we're talking about something transformational in society like climate change and all of the changes that have to happen in order to make that, as you were pointing out, Jason, what is the role of business leaders in trying to not only create change within their orbit, within their company, but sort of be societal leaders in that regard? I mean, is there an obligation, if you have a commitment to be going carbon neutral or carbon negative, to actually be in the forefront of making the case to society that that's something good, and to be part of not just industrial, but communities and other governments across 190 countries? Does Siemens or other similarly positioned companies have an obligation, and how do you balance that with shareholder requirements?
Now, what's fascinating when you look at the Siemens view of that question is you'll find that well over half of the products in our portfolio actually have a linkage to climate change and sustainability. We actually track something we call our environmental portfolio. Not only are we making changes within our own operations, we're working with customers who are going through a transformation. If any of you have ever heard of energy savings performance contracts, there are a lot of heads nodding in a Washington audience. Our own national mall, the Park Service, engaged in one of these contracts with Siemens years ago, and we've replaced lighting and water and such. All within the savings from their utility bill, they've been able to finance all of those technological changes. So we believe we're change agents within our customer environment. We're also change agents within our supply chain, and have to be. Now, how fast are things going to move? We know that we have to honor each enterprise's responsibility to stay in business. And so every one of us, whether it's supplier, customer, we, are going through that balancing act of what do we need to do. You know, when you get on an airplane and they say, if the oxygen masks drop, put on your own oxygen mask first. Responsible business people do have to be responsible to shareholders because we have to be able to keep a responsible business going in order to do these things which we are meant to do in fulfilling our purpose to society. So I would say to you that I think everyone who's in this environment is obviously working their own calculus. We've been working to use our voice to encourage more people to move with speed because we're out of time.
All right, well, so he's standing right next to you, Kelly. So you got to hand him the mic, and then we'll make the way over here, and that'll probably
Jason,
be.
Thank you for hosting this, and Barbara, thank you for your comments. John Gaffigan, VP of Sales for Fend in Arlington, as well as on the boards of Leaders in Energy and Boston Green Fest. What I care to know about, and I think the community might, Barbara, is what sort of things does Siemens look for in alliance partners, or many gaps that you may have, or just ways that we can proactively be relevant for Siemens and help you on this shared journey to be more sustainable as a society.
Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, Siemens has a tremendous focus on partnerships, and that's only growing because if there's one thing the digital world has shown us, platforms with lots of partners scale most effectively. So, you know, take that analogy, the equivalent of what you've seen in the consumer technologies, and now apply that to large scale, big technology that we've been working on. We're trying to use the same thought process. What makes a good partner for a company like Siemens? Well, for one thing, we do look for strong technical expertise. We look for a good complement to our skills. And what you'll find in Siemens, with our expertise in electrification, automation, digitalization, sometimes our best partners are those who are excellent at the project management end of things, others who are expert at the service provision for key things that maybe we don't do. Partners who are serving customers where we have an aspiration to be engaged with those customers and aren't today. And then likewise, we're doing the same thing. Incidentally, today, one of the things we're doing is an innovation incubator. So for very small companies that are just starting up, if they're looking for investment, we're seeking partners who would welcome a Siemens investment, who would benefit from access to our portfolio of business. That's cool. Right, and so we help companies scale. But let me share the number one thing. When you start to deal with us, the first thing you're going to hit is this moment of frustration where you go, why is this taking so long? And the fact is we do an incredible amount of due diligence. Siemens doing business around the world, as you can imagine, with all of these societies everywhere, we have a very extensive vetting process for the integrity, the roots, the foundation of the partners with whom we choose to do business. So I'll check you out and we can talk about that. Reagan, I know you asked a question.
Perfect, great. Hi there, great to see you again.
Do we need a microphone? Yes.
I can project if that's
I think the team needs a mic.
Great to see you again. So as a young female professional, and I see a couple around the room, so I hope we can humor this, I just wanted to get your counsel kind of on being a young female, particularly in areas of high innovation and rapid change where there's really not a roadmap to success. what would be your counsel to a young professional today about how we can best support each other, and any counsel you have as a female leader in a highly innovative field?
Thank you
Great
so
to
much.
see you again.
It's wonderful to see you too. You know, my key piece of advice I will say this would apply to anyone, but I think particularly I want to speak to young women about this, is if you perform well, your work will speak for itself, right? Have the confidence to know that your work matters. Raise your hand for great opportunities. When you see something challenging, go for it. Personally, my career path was paved with raising my hand for the hardest assignments. And the assignments that other people thought were ugly or might get you in trouble, politically sensitive, you know, all those kinds of things, I was focused more on, hey, is this going to be something that is going to take my skill in order to get done? Can I offer something here? And if I don't do it, what's going to happen? So raise your hand, get involved, perform. And all the rest, I think, takes care of itself.
Right here in the middle.
Hi, thank you for the very enlightening conversation. My name is Diogo Pereira. I'm a lawyer at Delmeda Pereira. And I thought it was really interesting what you were talking about civil discourse, especially between generations. And I find myself oftentimes in a situation having represented energy companies explaining to people my age or younger, you know, while climate change is important, but just how fundamental oil and gas and hydrocarbons are to our way of life. And I mean, I thought it was really interesting the way you framed everything. I was wondering if you had any advice on how to communicate. Of course, I mean, climate change is one of the big challenges of our generation, but also how fundamental energy is to our way of life, and how to communicate that across generations, if you had any tips.
You know, I think we need to all work on this together. The energy business is incredibly complex, right? It's highly technical, and it's not going to be a 5-minute discussion or 120 characters, right? To explain to somebody the interrelationship between a base load fueled by clean natural gas supplementing a wind farm or a solar field. And truly, as we transform and find ways to use hydrogen or find ways to improve storage solutions, our dependence on hydrocarbons for our power needs is going to decline. But it's a journey. And I'm going to leave it at that, just to say I don't know that I have any fantastic story to tell, other than, I don't know, Megan, should I tell the Blue Lake Rancheria story? Did you all read about this? The Washington Post featured Blue Lake Rancheria. It's native lands in Northern California. We had worked with PG&E and the tribe itself on what they would need in their energy infrastructure, and they asked us to put together a microgrid. It's solar, it's storage, and then connections to the PG&E grid. Well, when PG&E needed to do rolling blackouts because of environmental conditions, they were actually able to use Blue Lake Rancheria as a service hub. I think stories like that, real illustrations, I was delighted when the Washington Post picked this up. I think stories like that are really going to help people understand, oh, here's how the pieces fit together.
I've seen about 4 more questions. We got 3 right there and 1 here, and then that's probably going to wrap us up. So why don't we run the line?
Hello, Adam Darkins, Empiricon, Washington, D.C. Enjoyed your talk very much. I too believe very much technology is going to solve problems. My question really is, the most difficult thing is often how you fit the people with the technology.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to ask about facts and the rule of law. A quick background. My work has been involved in telemedicine, telehealth.
Yes.
How you link hundreds of thousands of patients into hundreds of sites. And it's very much around standardization. You can't have things where a physician believes one thing in one place, another in another place.
Yeah.
So the whole issue about how you take apart previous regulations, establish new regulations is tremendously important. In that environment, I really wanted to ask that as this new future of technology is going to be about standardization, doing things in the same way, it's really important to have a rule of law, to have facts and agreement on things. You've talked about society as a kind of one entity. We live in a world at the moment where society is fragmenting.
Yeah.
There isn't one view of things. And if there isn't objective facts to some extent, and if there isn't consensus around a rule of law, not only is technology different, but corporate life is difficult. So how do you see that issue around these dilemmas we have, slightly existential, around what is a fact, what is agreed? Because really, how do we build this society unless we get some kind of agreement around that?
Does anybody in this room have the answer to that question?
But you're dealing with it in a sense.
We are, and so what do we do? What does the responsible business do?
So I was saying pragmatic answer. I wasn't.
Yeah, right. What does a responsible business do? Well, here's what we do. We know that there are a couple of really tough sticking points: cybersecurity and privacy around data. We've created a charter of trust to articulate our view and the view of others who've joined the charter of trust on what are the core principles we'll commit to. Again, we're not waiting for regulation. We're taking the initiative and the responsibility ourselves to put that out there. Same thing with the data charter. 6 principles of using data, and I won't go through them, though I can. Let me know. But the idea of establishing communities of experts who ought to be the authorities in certain realms. It's important for Siemens to be working with the automotive industry and with the energy industry on what the standards for the future are, because there are a lot of these things that we can just help to establish. An example, Microsoft Word. Does anybody remember the day when Microsoft Word was not the standard? There was a time when people argued about what's the best word processor, et cetera. Well, you know what? Darwinian approaches won out, and we all now will use Microsoft Word really without thinking twice. I believe that we're in the midst of that kind of dialogue around any number of topics. Hang on to your hat, but get in the game.
Got more questions on this side?
Hello, great job.
Thanks.
My question is going to be about data center trends.
Oh.
My name is Daniel Weiss. I'm with 4IR Microgrids, and we convert decommissioned power plants into data centers. And we hear 4,000 new data centers are needed. I don't know if it's true.
It's true.
And at 25 megawatts and 250,000 square feet. Can you enlighten us on what is happening in data centers in this area in the United States?
All right. And Abby, can you connect afterwards? This is, everybody keeps telling me we're in a data center bubble. Hogwash, right? The amount of data, let's see, Megan gave me a stat the other day that we have 40 zettabytes of data that have been produced. That's 40 times the number of stars there are in the visible universe. Now think about that, right? So data is expanding, some say exponentially. What do we need for that to manage all of that data? Data centers. And so this growth is tremendous. Connectivity to telecom, to the communication networks is critical, and that's why Northern Virginia is such a hotbed of data center construction. Access to power is critical, and this is why on-site power for data centers has become such a hot topic. I told Lindsey Graham that the critical path for the future of our digital world runs through South Carolina, and I'll tell you why. Turns out there's plenty of access to comms, there's plenty of places where you can add additional power, but do you know that the electrical switchgear that goes into a data center is made by only a handful of companies, Siemens being one of them, and all plants are at capacity. In our facility in Spartanburg, South Carolina, we cannot make it fast enough. So, yeah, the critical path runs through South Carolina.
Sounds like you got a decent business model.
Thanks, Barbara and Jason. This is great. I'm Jeff Edelstein. I'm with the Consensus Building Institute, and I'm also a recovering engineer. So as a mediator and an engineer, I kind of am at that intersection between technology and people. And I don't see it as an either or.
No.
And I guess maybe as a mediator, I'll ask you 2 questions, and you can take one of them, because I don't want you to be on the spot. Because one of them is a little bit kind of techie. Great forum here a few weeks ago, I think it was, talking about the revival of the Office of Technology Assessment for Congress. And GAO is now doing more work in science and technology, and this all goes to this issue of how do we help members of Congress understand these technology issues. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, but I realize that's a pretty wonky question. So my other one is, what would you suggest or advise around leadership within Congress? And maybe that's just something that's a suggestion, or what are your 3 words that you would offer, just to put it in that way?
Yeah. Engage in civil discourse. Okay, that's the answer to that one. And I'm proud to serve on the board of the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. We have fantastic groups here in the Washington, D.C. area who get to spend time and talent thinking about some of these hard questions of what's the best setup that we need in order to support effective decision-making in government. One of the things that, in fact, the center has done recently is establish a Congressional Defense Fellows program. The idea being that a lot of people come to work on the Hill and they haven't really gotten insight into how national security technology and plans, strategies are actually supported and deliberated on. And so drawing people in, giving them access to real experts like another board member, Randy Forbes, having experts like that advise the folks who are really taking on this tough job now on the Hill. I think that's a little piece of the puzzle, but I know that you can get a lot of help elsewhere in the audience from folks who've got ideas about how to solve these tough problems. Thanks.
Last question.
Thank you. My name is Sharon Dorkenbell, and I work in affordable housing. And I'd like to talk to you more about your vision for the future of the workforce. So you've talked about expanding it, technology and education and training to rural areas, raising people up in education. But what about people who are at the bottom of the economic ladder? They're not in the education system. They don't have job skills. They are low income. What's the future, do you think, for them?
I'm so encouraged by what I'm seeing in not only grassroots efforts, but governmental and I'll say very, very structured efforts to reach out into those underserved groups now. So I'm confident that we're going to see a network of NGOs as well as educational institutions supporting governments as they reach out. Now, just today I had a meeting with a gentleman who's going to be helping Alabama through discussions along these lines. Back to that subject of apprenticeships, there are some folks who truly need to be able to hit that reset button. And the study he's embarking on is one of, can I really truly draw people from the sidelines who've never had opportunity? Can I put them into environments there where they will become candidates to be apprentices with businesses in Alabama? And that premise is being supported by foundations, and what I'm doing is linking him into the work of the Siemens Foundation, where we've devoted all of our philanthropic giving to the development of middle skills. Reaching those populations is going to be critical. Thank you.
So Barbara, it is rare that someone provides such a kind of informed, pragmatic, global optimism. And just on a personal level, I appreciate it because this is a tough town. And it's nice to be able to actually extrapolate a little bit beyond, but your ability to really kind of anchor it in the specifics of what Siemens is doing has really been impressive. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you all.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And we own the place, so if you want to get something to eat or drink, don't go away.
I'll have what he's having.